Hello Year 9 and welcome to your second task of the week on Of Mice and Men. It should be Thursday the 14th of May. So yesterday you should have read chapter 3 of Mice and Men. I hope you're all enjoying the book and you're getting on with it well. Remember, there is a audiobook version on YouTube that if you prefer to kind of listen to it as you're following the text, please do that. There are also some really good chapter summaries on the English department YouTube page, which if you're struggling to kind of get your head around everything that's happening in each of the chapters, watching those for a couple of minutes will really help after you've done your reading. So for today's task, you will need a pen, you will need your exercise book or some paper to write on, and you will need the worksheet for this task, which was linked on class charts. Now, if you can't print it out, that's fine. What you can do is obviously copy it down from this video onto a piece of paper. What I suggest you do is, as we go through the video, pause it when you need to complete a task and then just restart it again when you're done. Okay? So today we are going to be thinking about tension, and specifically how Steinbeck creates tension in chapter 3 of the novel. So first of all, I want you to think about what is tension? How would you define the word tension? So what I'd like you to do is pause the video and have a go at writing down in your exercise book what you understand the word tension to mean. So when I think about tension, I'm first of all going to think about what the word means, but also then how we apply it to English, or in this case, how that sensation, emotion is created within a text. So tension is the feeling of something being stretched tight. So for example, if you are playing tug of war, and both teams are pulling on the rope, then that would create tension within the rope, okay? But it can also mean a mental or emotional strain. And this is often the type of tension that we're talking about when we explore it in texts, whether that be novels or plays or films. I always talk about with my classes the film Jaws, if those of you who have seen it. So the film Jaws is about a giant shark that keeps eating people. And Steven Spielberg, who's the director of Jaws, commissioned this very expensive robotic shark to be made so that they could obviously have all of this amazing footage of this shark hunting people down and killing them. However, when the robotic shark was made, it looked rubbish. It looked absolutely fake and plastic and completely unscary. So Steven Spielberg had to go back to the drawing board in terms of what he'd planned to do with filming. He needed his audience to be scared of the shark, but he couldn't show the shark. So for those of you who've seen Jaws, you will know what happens. And actually, most of the shark attacks, you don't see the shark at all. In fact, you see shots of the water almost through the shark's point of view. But what helps to create the tension is the music in Jaws. And what that does is, as an audience, we get this sense that something is about to happen. Every time we hear that piece of music, we know that that shark is about to attack. And tension within a written piece of work can work very much like that piece of music. There's that sense that something is about to happen. And there's numerous ways that an author can do that. So some of the ways, they can vary their sentence lengths. So if you suddenly get a lot of short sentences together, that can give the sense that something's going to happen. But also, if they really kind of drag out and lengthen the sentences, that can add to our sense as a reader of, oh my gosh, please tell me what's going to happen. Hurry up, I need to know. They can also use atmospheric words. So the kind of vocabulary that they're using can help to create the tension. And also they can delay the action So deliberately kind of drawing out or holding back from something that you're almost expecting to happen. So as we start looking through chapter 3, we're going to think about those three things. So on the right hand side of the PowerPoint, we've got a question here. Explain how Steinbeck uses language to create tension in the following quotations. This is a quotation from chapter 3. George looked over at Slim and saw the calm, godlike eyes fasten on him. So just very quickly on your piece of paper, pause the video, jot down some initial ideas. So how do you think Steinbeck is using language to create tension in that quotation? So think about, where is the tension coming from? Right, hopefully you've picked up on Slim's description. He's got calm, godlike eyes which fasten on him. So here we've got a great example of using atmospheric words to create tension. So the fact that Slim's eyes are described as being as godlike, the idea that they're all seeing, they're all powerful, you know, they can see into the very nature, the very truth of George, makes him very powerful. But also the fact that his eyes fasten on him, you know, they're almost attaching to him, kind of also emphasise that sense that perhaps he can tell something about George that other people can't. So all of that could lead into creating tension. If we think about what we know about George and Lenny so far, we know that they've travelled from somewhere else where they've had to leave. People are very suspicious of them because they go around together. That could all lead to increasing the tension in this chapter. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're just going to recap very quickly a couple of moments from chapter 3 before we get onto the worksheet that you're going to be doing. So in the middle, you've got a quote. So George is telling Slim what happened to Lenny in Weed. So George confides in Slim about the reason that he and Lenny had to leave Weed, the place that they previously worked. So the quotation we've got in the middle is, well, he's seen this girl in a red dress. So we've got 4 boxes around that are going to get us to kind of pull apart this quotation. Now, you don't need to write anything down. Just be thinking about your answers kind of before I then talk it through. So let's start on the left-hand side. Consider the connotations of the colour red. So what do you associate with the colour red? So think about, you know, if you see the colour red, what kind of things do you associate with it? If something was chosen to be coloured red, what might that indicate to us? So I've done this. I've jotted down what I kind of thought the colour red might represent. Sometimes it represents danger, passion, love. Think about, you know, when it's Valentine's Day, everything is red. But also anger, and it can also sometimes represent danger in the sense of we often associate it with blood. So there's kind of 2 really opposite things going on there. On one side we've got kind of love and passion, and then we've got danger on the other. So the question underneath says, where else does red come into the novel? So can you think where else we've come across the colour red before? Hopefully you've remembered that when we first meet Curly's wife, she is wearing red. She's got red lipstick on, she's got red fingernails, and she's got red shoes on. So think about how Steinbeck is starting to introduce this tension. He's telling us a story of something that's happened in the past that has not, it's an event that has not gone well. It's caused George and Lenny to have to leave where they were working. And we're already drawing associations between the girl in Weed and Curly's wife. So on the other side it says, now you know the connotations of red. Think about how Steinbeck uses it to present his messages to the reader. So think about those connotations that we've talked about, danger, passion, love, and just have a little think about what Steinbeck could be saying about those things and where he's used the colour red so far in the novel. And the last point, could there be an element of foreshadowing here? So foreshadowing is a narrative device where we kind of get a hint of what's going to come. So do we think that what happened to the girl in Weed is somehow foreshadowing something that's going to happen later on in the novel? Have a think, maybe make a prediction, and as you read on over the next few weeks, you can see if you are correct or not. Right, the other quotation that we're going to look at also comes from chapter 3, and this is about Candy's dog. So he ain't no good to you, Candy, and he ain't no good to himself. Why don't you shoot him, Candy? So if you remember, this is the men in the bunkhouse, particularly Carlson, who comes in and is in a bad mood, have had enough of Candy's old smelly dog, and they want him to shoot him. Candy's quite reluctant. He's had the dog since he was a puppy. So let's have a look at this and think about how tension is being created at this point. So if we start on the left-hand side, if you think about what usually happens to animals in the novel, so think about animals that we've met so far, and how that might add to creating tension. So if you think about things like the mouse that Lenny picked up in chapter 1 because he wanted to pet it, but it was actually killed. So animals seem to have a habit of dying of mice and men, but also obviously on the ranch they're used for work. But obviously Candy's dog is no longer fit and able to work. So is there a sense of tension created because we know something unpleasant is going to happen to the dog? So the second point there is, what kind of characters are Carlson and Candy, and who do you think will win the argument based on their characteristics? So we already know that Candy is kind of one of the men with the lowest status on the ranch. Because he's lost his hand, he is no longer able to work properly, and he's the swamper. He does the cleaning up after everybody else, and he talks about this a bit later on in chapter 3, which you'll remember from reading. Candy's kind of social standing means that he's probably unlikely to win this argument. Because Coulson is kind of more highly regarded within the bunkhouse, everyone else is probably going to side with him. So in the box on the top right, this is the middle of the novel. Think about the structure of the story. Why is now the perfect moment to start creating tension? So if you think about, in the past you would have done work in English, thinking about story mountains and how a story is structured. Stories often work in a kind of arch shape. So the tension and the action starts building up to a kind of key moment. So obviously we've got to the kind of centre point of the novel at this point. So Steinbeck's now introducing the sense that something is going to happen. And lastly, how does the verb shoot help build the tension in this part of the novel? So obviously, shoot is quite it's a blunt word. There's no emotion attached to the word and to the killing of the dog. They're not using the word, kill or murder. Shoot is very blunt, but also because it's a verb, it's very immediate. Why don't you kind of do it now? There's no point hanging around. Right, this is the worksheet that you're going to be using for the rest of the task. So if you've managed to print one out, brilliant, have it in front of you. If not, you can always pause the video when you need to answer the questions. You don't obviously need to copy all the text out from the middle. So I'm going to read you the extract in the middle, and then I'll talk you through what you need to be doing on the worksheet. So Candy did not answer. The silence fell on the room again. It came out of the night and invaded the room. George said, "Anybody like to play a little euchre?" "I'll play out a few with you," said Whit. They took their places opposite each other at the table under the light, but George did not shuffle the cards. He rippled the edges of the deck nervously, and the little slapping noise drew the eyes of all the men in the room, so that he stopped doing it. The silence fell on the room again. A minute passed, and another minute. Candy lay still, staring at the ceiling. Slim gazed at him for a moment and then looked down at his hands. He subdued one hand with the other and held it down. There came a little gnawing sound from under the floor, and all the men looked down towards it gratefully. Only Candy continued to stare at the ceiling. "Sounds like there was a rat under there," said George. "We ought to get a trap down there." Whit broke out. "What the hell's taken him so long? Lay out some cards, why don't you? We ain't going to get no euchre played this way." George brought the cards together tightly and studied the backs of them. The silence was in the room again. A shot sounded in the distance. The men looked quickly at the old man. Every head turned towards him. For a moment he continued to stare at the ceiling. Then he rolled slowly over and faced the wall and lay silent. So this is the moment in chapter 3 where Carlson has taken out Candy's dog to kill him. And Steinbeck uses sounds and the absence of sound to really, really effectively create the tension in that moment. We obviously can't see what's going on with the dog, like the men in the bunkhouse. We're removed from that actually happening, but they know it's happening and we're waiting for that moment. So, number of things you need to do. So the first task asks you to highlight the words which refer to sounds in one colour, and in a different colour, highlight those words which refer to silence. So that's the first thing you need to do. The second thing you need to do is then annotate around the extract, answering the questions that are in the boxes. Okay, so have a go at those. You can obviously go back and read through the text if you're not sure. A lot of it is going to be getting you to think really carefully about the language that is used. So think about the connotation of the words. You know, why has Steinbeck particularly chosen that word and what does it tell us? So pause the video whilst you're doing that sheet, and then there's a tiny little thing to do when you finish that. So the last thing you're going to do today is write a really short P paragraph, just summing up what you've learnt about tension in that extract. So you can use obviously your worksheets to help you. So you just need a point, a quotation, and then you need to analyse that quotation. So if you get stuck, there's a little box on the right hand side that give you some sentence starters to help. So, for example, in chapter 3 of Mice and Men, Steinbeck uses language relating to sound and silence to create tension for his readers. So you've got your point there. Then you need to find a quotation to back it up and zoom in on a word. So analyse it. Pick a word out from your quotation. What does it tell us? How does it help to create tension? And then if you want to, you can go on and add a second point. But doing one P chain is more than enough. And obviously stick to within your 30 minutes. Right, I hope this has been helpful. Thank you very much.